My aim in this talk is to give you a brief but accurate summary of the 5 key Liberal climate policies we assist for the Kooyong Climate Scorecard. I'll explain even more briefly why we rated them as poor in all cases, the lowest score on our scale. The first area we scored was the candidates' recognition of the climate emergency. The importance of this recognition is obvious. It provides a context for all other climate policies and some assurance that even if there are gaps in the solutions offered, at least the magnitude of the problem is recognised. Unfortunately, there's no reference to the climate emergency in Liberal policy, nor any attempt to convey the need for urgent action. The next policy area we considered was the 2030 emissions target. As I'm sure you're aware, the Liberals' target is to reduce emissions by 26 to 28% from 2005 levels. Despite stating that we're on track for a reduction of up to 35% by 2030, the Liberals have declined to increase their Abbott-era target. In the context of the Climate Council's recommendation of a 75% reduction, or even the less ambitious targets of other OECD countries, this target is clearly inadequate. Our third scoring area was the transition to renewables, with the main focus on the national electricity grid. The Liberals describe their plan for net zero as technology-driven and commit to $22 billion of government investment in low emissions technology to 2030. Unfortunately, the definitions are so loose that carbon capture and storage and production of hydrogen from fossil fuels are included as priorities. But the investment also prioritises solar generation and energy storage, and stretch goals for reduced costs have been set for both. Technology deployment is to be private sector led, with barriers to the integration of more renewables in the grid addressed by major government investments, including Snowy 2.0, the Marinas Link interconnector and other grid improvements. However, at the same time, the Liberals are actively promoting new gas generation, underwriting a new 660 megawatt open cycle gas turbine in New South Wales. And the hollowness of the overall grid transition plan is clear in the projection that it will result in only 85% renewable generation in 2050, with a significant proportion of gas and some remaining coal in the electricity grid. This in the context of a renewables proportion of close to 100% in 2030 in one of the energy market operators' plausible future scenarios. The fourth area we looked at was electric vehicle policy. Here, the Liberals' central focus is on charging infrastructure and the EV readiness of the grid. An expanded $250 million future fuels fund and changes to the emissions reduction fund are designed to leverage private investment. However, there is no policy to tighten emission standards, reduce EV costs for consumers, or plan to phase out new petrol vehicle sales. The projection once again highlights the weakness of the policy. Only 30% of new vehicle sales would be EVs or hybrid by 2030. This compares with the UK government commitment to phase out sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. The final area we considered was fossil fuel mining. Here the picture is very simple. The Liberals support continued fossil fuel mining and have no policy to phase out coal and gas production. The gas-fired recovery is central to government thinking. It includes major government investment to support new gas extraction through the Future Gas Infrastructure Investment Framework. Earlier this month, the Commonwealth and Northern Territory governments signed an $872 million deal to accelerate development of the Beetaloo Gas Basin, including $660 million of federal funding. This is only the first of 5 gas basins identified for future development. This policy flies in the face of the International Energy Agency's pathway to net zero, which recommends no investment in new fossil fuel supply. In addition to these 5 climate policy areas, we also analysed and scored two governance-related policies, a Federal Integrity Commission and political donations law reform. We felt these needed to be included because of the clear link between failures in governance and failures in climate policy. I won't go into the details here, but we found the Liberals' policies in both these areas to be seriously wanting, just as they are in the more specifically climate-related areas. If you're so inclined, you can find much more about all these policies and those of the other candidates, as well as full details of our scoring rationale on the Kooyong Votes Climate website. Thank you very much.
Authorised by Lighter Footprints Incorporated, Q, Victoria.